everybody that's turned up for the Mount Isa City Council's Materials Recovery Facilities Forum. Just like the acknowledgement of country, Mount Isa City Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land of the Kalkadoons and the Injulungi people on which we work and live, and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. We pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Recording of council meeting. Please note that this ordinary meeting is being recorded in accordance with council's recording of council meeting policy, which can be viewed on council website. As a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded by remaining in chambers. It is assumed your consent is given if your image is inadvertently broadcast. Please be advised that no protection is forwarded to the public for comments made during the meeting which are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be defamatory or slanderous. Councillors, council officers and public are required to adhere to the council standing orders policy, model meeting procedures and chambers conditions of entry. Thank you. Now I'd just like to hand it over to Bernard Smith and he's going to go through a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here to talk about the materials recycling facility, which in effect we're here to talk about recycling and curbside recycling in Mount Isa. Curbside recycling has been part of the landscape in Australia for over 30 years, but I think it's fair to say it's really gained additional momentum over the last 2 to 3 years. And in terms of putting some context around it, it's important to look at it from a federal level and a state level. The federal government has become particularly actively involved on this front over the last 2 or 3 years, principally around concerns with the exporting of waste and recyclables overseas and the appropriateness of that. Given that, they've introduced some targets around the recovery of 80% of waste by 2030 and are in the process of introducing export bans on glass and plastics in particular, with the glass ban to commence in the middle of this year. This in effect is saying that we have to manage our own waste, our own recycling within Australia and cannot simply ship it overseas. To supplement that, all states have a fairly strong policy around waste minimisation. The state government has stated it wishes to have 50% of household waste recycled by 2025. It wishes to transition to the circular economy, which in effect means materials keep being reinvented, keep being recycled into other products as much as possible. And something I'll dwell a little bit on later on is they have most significantly introduced a waste levy, which currently sits at $80 a tonne. And really what that is doing is sending a price signal to the community, arguably using financial means to encourage not only recycling but also encourage markets for recyclable materials. It's important to think about the basic question of why recycle. Of course, it's good environmental practice. It reduces that need for raw materials, which relates back to the circular economy. Keep reusing steel a number of times, keep reusing aluminium a number of times rather than going to the raw product. There is a high community expectation. I think our survey earlier in the year indicated 90% support for recycling, and that certainly needs to be borne in mind. Not that it's a reason in itself, but curbside recycling has existed in Australia for over 30 years, starting off with sort of simple 55 litre crates a long, long time ago. It does save expensive landfill space. We anticipate we'll be requiring a new landfill cell in 3 to 5 years. That could easily be at a cost of $2 to $3 million. So the ability to firstly defer that cost, the ability to extend the life of the landfill, hopefully forever, does bring with it significant savings. And recycling does save money by avoiding the landfill levy, which I'll touch on now. So the state government introduced the landfill levy in 2019. It's currently a charge of $80 per tonne. It's sending a price signal. It's, dare I say, a tax. It's a tax which drives behaviour. It's a tax which is there to stimulate an industry that around recyclables. By way of example, council's waste levy payment for April just gone was $167,000. Now, a lot of that was collected at the gate from commercial customers. However, a fair amount of that was also due to domestic waste. When the state government introduced the landfill levy, it said for the first 3 years, it will refund the levy attributable to domestic waste. And we will be reimbursed around $70,000 to reflect that domestic waste component. You don't introduce a levy, in brackets a tax, and then hand it back without there being some longer term goal, I suppose. It is expected that in 2022 that levy will start to be withdrawn, otherwise why have the levy in the first place? I think really what is being said is the state government is giving local government and industry in general 3 years to start to generate more recycling, start to initiate more recycling, start to put the mechanisms and the practices in place, such as a MRF. So what is council proposing? It's proposing the construction of a materials recovery facility. That'll be a facility where the conventional looking garbage truck will back in and unload the cardboard, the aluminium, the steel, the glass will be sorted and baled, compacted depending on the material and sold off to further downstream. It involves the introduction of a fortnightly curbside recycling collection that is been found to be the norm with other municipalities. There will be a greater focus on recycling, construction and demolition waste. That's still a little bit of a work in progress, but if you consider that we're paying the landfill levy on every tonne of concrete and dirt and timber, the ability or the potential of trying to separate that as much as possible and avoid that levy, that obviously has a significant payback for council and for the community. We are about to commence a more detailed audit at the landfill in order just to, some loads are obviously suited for sorting and others aren't. And something we'll dwell a little bit on a bit later on is the introduction of a weekly garbage collection as opposed to the current twice weekly garbage collection. What will be recycled? It'll be the things a lot of people are used to recycling, paper, cardboard. I won't go through the list there. How will it be? I've probably covered this a little bit already. We'll empty the curbside recycling bin every fortnight. The materials will be sorted, baled, and we've mentioned construction and demolition waste. How much will it cost? The capital cost will be in the order of $9 million. The federal government has provided funding of 6.06. I think it's fair to say that we are negatively impacted by the tyranny of distance. Queensland is covered by what it's called the landfill levy zone, which not every part of Queensland, which is understandable, is covered by the levy. You go to the extremely remote areas. If you look at the map, it obviously covers pretty much the southern boundary and the southeast corner and the east coast, and we're stuck as a bit of an island within that landfill levy zone, within the area where we have to pay the levy. However, we don't have the access to the materials recycling facilities in Brisbane, in the Sunshine Coast, Townsville, Cairns, Toowoomba. Almost every other council is probably within 200 or 300 kilometres of an existing MRF. We aren't, where the nearest one's 800-900 kilometres away. So not only are we required to access a MRF in the way we are, but we don't have the economies of scale of the operation of that MRF as well. The tonnages going through it will be significantly less and hence be adding to the operating cost. The annual operating cost of the facility is expected to be approximately $570,000, excluding depreciation. That will be mitigated a little bit by the ability to divert approximately 1,900 tonnes of recyclables, which will reduce our landfill levy. The impact on the garbage collection, one garbage collection service per week as opposed to the existing two. To look at it another way, our curbside disposal capacity will go from 4 bin collections per fortnight to 3 bin collections per fortnight. Obviously there'll be recyclables which will go from the current garbage collection into the recycling bin. There is of course the option, so I'll go back a point, in terms of significant population centres, we're probably the only one in Australia which has 2 collections per week. To maintain a twice weekly garbage collection of course is possible. That comes at a cost of an additional $230,000 per year. So in fact, adding that to the recycling collection would add a reasonable amount of capacity to the curbside collection. As I said, prevailing practice across Australia has found once a week garbage collection to be possible and adequate. We have had some concerns raised about the heat, which is fair enough, although we have, and I think the next slide ascertained that, there's a number of councils operate in similar climates who have the once weekly collection. The long time common concern about foodstuffs and so forth has always been the advice to, if you are really concerned, put them in an airtight container, freeze them, actions along those lines. And that's, as I said, a lot of Australia is covered by very hot weather and there haven't been found to be any significant issues there. I think the other part too is in terms of the result of the survey we had earlier in the year. By way of interest, in the 2016 census, 43% of residents of Mount Isa had moved address in the previous 5 years. Of course, some of that would have been within Mount Isa, so I need to acknowledge that. But I think the moral of the story is there's a significant component of the population have some experience with the weekly garbage fortnightly recycling collection. It does sit beside the container exchange program as well. That the principal reason for that being introduced across Australia, the first one being in South Australia 20 or 25 years ago, was around litter, minimising litter. It is acknowledged that it does also add to recycling in general. However, there's varying views about whether it impacts negatively or positively on curbside collection. Yes, it may reduce the volumes slightly. On the other hand, the introduction of a container exchange scheme means that the materials recycling facility generates additional revenue through in effect is being paid per container as well. So it wouldn't be attributed so much to us, but it can also reduce the cost of curbside collection through less materials. But I think the reality is, in a relatively small population like Mount Isa, you wouldn't see those costs in a real sense. Or sorry, those savings in a real sense. Just a handful of local government comparisons. We councillors have discussed previously Cairns, Darwin, Alice Springs, Broome, locations where they have a similar service. In terms of options for if there was a move for an additional curbside garbage collection, as I said, we can maintain that at a cost of $230,000 a year. Alternately, some councils make a provision for providing an additional 240 or 120 litre bin upon request. The only example I could find in a very quick look was Hinchinbrook, where they charged an additional $190 per year if you wish to have the additional 240 litre bin. And again, they're sending a price signal, encouraging the recycling, encouraging the use of the recycling bin, encouraging waste minimisation in general through the pricing of that. The current status of the project, and this in fact is the council resolution from a couple of months ago, we're due to commence the detailed design of the materials recycling facility. That in effect is the machinery inside the shed. It's sorters, it's trommels, it's screens, it's hand sorting as well. As part of the design, consider the option of incorporating the sorting of construction and demolition and commercial waste. I've spoken about that a little bit. Undertaking the consultation, which we are now, and talking about the options which we have just done for residents wishing to have an additional garbage collection service. From a practical point of view, I've spoken about the designer for the MRF equipment and the shed, the design of the MRF, design the shed, the construction phase, and if all went the way we thought, it would commence in late 2022 or early 2023. And of course, we're keen to get the public's feedback and queries through the normal avenues.
Thank you, Bernard, for that. I suppose open up to the public for any questions.
Do council have any plans to create some kind of compost or clean fill out of the demolition, the concrete, if somebody was looking for clean fill? If somebody wanted to take green waste out there, could they in turn buy compost from the council landfill area?
Well, the two important distinct parts to your question. In terms of the clean fill soil material, yes, you'd like to think that that could be reused, whether it's on site for cover material or sold. You know, there's obviously the quality consideration. Composting is a different kettle of fish. It's a more technical process. You need reasonable volumes for that. Certainly a lot of our southern councils, which is most councils in Australia, a lot of them in the large population areas, are starting to, they have 3 bins, not 2. They have the benefits of economies of scale, and of course they also generate more green waste as well. And I think that's a very important part of it. So I think we're a fair way off the composting scenario. Green waste and shredding is closer. We take green waste out there now, just as general waste, and that can be used for cover material, and under certain circumstances may be able to be passed on to the public. The soil, the crushed rock, yes, that has more practical applications. But yeah, you're talking about.
And my other question is freight-wise, because again, we all recognise that we are definitely impacted by the distance to any form of market where we are. Who is responsible for the freight movement of anything that you're baling or selling?
There's 2 ways. The facility would bale, pack it, depending on the material. Our preference would be that whoever we're selling it to, it's something we haven't explored in detail. It would have been worked into the costings. I mean, ultimately the freight's the freight, and the more important, it is a key cost input, but the freight is the freight. But the detailed costings which I don't have here, have taken it into account. We in fact did look at the option of just freighting the raw recyclables to somewhere like Townsville, and there was minimal saving with regard to that. And if you were to be, you know, a bit of an environmental purist, you could argue whether that's good practice anyway.
Hello. So the question I have is, does anyone know the additional jobs that will be generated from the MRF? Like what sort of numbers we're talking about? Like new jobs created, not existing jobs being transferred into work for at the MRF.
One of the difficulties with the MRF I mentioned before is the economies of scale, and the fact that it won't be run 40 hours a week. So we were looking at 8 staff for approximately 20 hours per week to operate the facility. So obviously there's sorting, there is still a degree of manual sorting associated. So there's something like 6 to 8 positions.
Is this the recycling bins, will they just be for residential services or for commercial services as well?
Look, a commercial property could certainly still have a recycling bin.
Will they get the bin for free, essentially, a second service for free?
Yeah, the cost of the bin itself, is part of the capital cost.
Yeah, that's
So,
one service a week for commercial.
sorry,
It's one service a week for commercial services,
I
and they
mean-
get one pickup.
you're talking about a commercial rubbish collection, which might
Yeah,
be
like the
front loader, which is
240
a
or the
different kettle of fish. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if normally we would work it on everyone getting a fortnightly collection, it may well be you have to think about the logistical side of that. It may well be that they're better off having 2 recycling bins picked up once a fortnight than one pickup per week.
Yeah.
We haven't gone into that detail yet.
I guess I just wondered if, you know, if people are putting non-recyclables in the waste, how would that be captured? Like if someone was, putting non-recyclables into their,
Into the recycling bin.
yeah.
Oh, look, that's a perennial problem. Every council deals with it. In fact, one of the angles of coexisting with COEX is if there is less broken glass in the recyclables, the price you get for your paper is improved. So, that's just by the by. But look, it is a problem. There needs to be a fair degree of public education. And again, if you look at any council who has been doing this for a long time, they're very strong on their public education. They have waste apps, they have your little calendars you stick on the side of the fridge, they have campaigns. It will always be a problem that the plant is designed around in acknowledgement of a degree of contamination, and that's one reason why you have a degree of hand sorting as well. If it was 100% pure recyclables, there'd be a way to mechanically sort it, but that's not the case.
Have you thought of clothing to be recycled?
We haven't gone there yet. Well, we just have to start with the simple steps.
I know.
Sorry. At the MRF, will there be bays where the general public, if by chance they had their recyclables sorted, a box of paper and cardboard, box
Yeah,
of
for
glass
sure.
bottles?
Look, it may well be that we take those at the transfer station, which is 100 metres from the MRF. So yes. You're only allowed 3 questions, Jake.
Like obviously, well, that's my third one now. So obviously, it's like while we're here, like was it to say that when would the tip shop be ready to go?
There's been no decision made about a tip shop yet.
Yeah.
So that's about it. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and that wraps up the public consultation for the MRF. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, look, we do have one more session next week. So if anyone sitting at home, glued to the screen, wants to come along, same time, same place.